There is a category of food that operates by completely different rules than everything else in your pantry. While most of what you buy at the grocery store has a shelf life measured in days, weeks, or at best a few years, this category contains foods that can sit in proper storage for decades, and in some cases, indefinitely. Not because of artificial preservatives, not because of modern food technology, but because of fundamental chemistry, biology, and physics that make certain foods hostile environments for the bacteria, mold, and enzymes that destroy everything else. Today, we are counting down 30 of those foods. These are not niche survival rations or specialty products you have to order online. Most of them are available in every grocery store in America. But behind each one is a scientific reason, a specific mechanism that explains exactly why it lasts so much longer than everything else. And understanding that mechanism is what lets you store it correctly, so that when you reach for it years from now, it is exactly as good as the day you bought it. We are going from number 30 down to number 1. The items at the bottom of the list are the most valuable, the most densely caloric, the most historically proven long-term food stores in human history. By the end of this video, you will have a complete, science-backed framework for building a food supply that does not expire. Let us start at number 30. Item 30. Ramen noodles and instant noodles. Ramen noodles sit at the bottom of this list for a reason. Not because they are unimportant, but because their longevity, while impressive compared to fresh food, is the most modest on this countdown. And yet they are worth including because they are cheap, calorie-dense, widely available, and genuinely useful in a food storage context. Instant ramen noodles are made from wheat flour that has been flash-fried in palm oil, then dehydrated. This frying process, combined with low moisture content and the airtight packaging, gives them a real shelf life of 2 to 5 years. The noodles themselves are shelf-stable indefinitely. But the flavoring packets contain fats and dehydrated vegetables that eventually oxidize and go rancid, which is the limiting factor. The flavor degrades well before the noodle becomes unsafe. The science here is simple. Bacterial spoilage requires water. At moisture content below 4%, microorganisms cannot survive. Instant noodles are typically manufactured to a moisture level around 3%, placing them firmly in the stable zone. The frying oil does oxidize over time, which is why older ramen tastes flat and slightly stale. But the noodles themselves remain safe and edible far beyond the printed date. From a supply chain standpoint, instant noodles are manufactured in enormous volumes globally. Approximately 100 billion servings are consumed worldwide each year. Indonesia, China, India, Vietnam, and Japan are the largest producers. Wheat flour and palm oil, the two primary inputs, have experienced repeated price shocks in recent years, and ramen prices at U.S. retail have risen 20 to 30% since 2020. This makes buying in quantity now a practical hedge against continued price increases. How to store them? Keep in their original packaging in a cool, dark, dry location. For extended storage, vacuum sealing packages inside a larger Mylar bag will extend the flavor packet's life significantly by reducing oxygen exposure. Aim for 50 to 100 packages as a base level, supplemented by the better long-term options further up this list. Item 29. Bouillon cubes and powder cubes. And granulated bouillon powder sit just above instant ramen because their shelf life, when stored correctly, extends significantly further, up to 10 years or beyond for commercially sealed granulated bouillon. While providing something instant noodles cannot, the ability to transform other long-term stored foods into genuinely flavorful meals. Bouillon is essentially dehydrated, concentrated stock, chicken, beef, or vegetable, combined with salt, yeast extract, fat, and spices, pressed into cube form or granulated. The extreme sodium content A typical bouillon cube contains 900 milligrams of sodium, acts as a powerful preservative, creating a hostile osmotic environment for microorganisms. Combined with moisture content below 3%, this double barrier makes bouillon one of the most stable savory foods available. The critical distinction for long-term storage is between cube and granulated form. Cubes are individually foil-wrapped, but over time, the foil seal can degrade, allowing moisture infiltration that causes the cube to harden and become difficult to dissolve, though it remains safe. Granulated bouillon in sealed glass jars or vacuum-sealed foil pouches performs significantly better for extended storage, maintaining both texture and flavor integrity for many years. Bouillon is particularly valuable in a long-term food storage context because it bridges the palatability gap between survival eating and actual cooking. Rice, dried beans, and wheat can sustain a person nutritionally, but become psychologically difficult to eat meal after meal when cooked without seasoning. A small amount of chicken bouillon transforms plain rice into something genuinely satisfying. This psychological and morale dimension of food storage is frequently underestimated. How to store them. Transfer commercially purchased granulated bouillon from its original canister into a sealed glass mason jar or vacuum-sealed Mylar bag with an oxygen absorber. Store in a cool, dark location. Cubes should be kept in their individual foil wrappers inside an airtight container. A 2-pound container of granulated bouillon provides hundreds of servings and takes up minimal space, an exceptional value by any measure. Item 28. Hard candy and pure sugar confections, pure sugar candies, hard candies, rock candy, candy canes, and similar confections made almost entirely from sucrose have an effectively indefinite shelf life when kept dry. This is not marketing language. This is chemistry. Sucrose, the primary component of hard candy, is hygroscopic. It absorbs moisture from the air, but when properly sealed in an airtight container at low humidity, it remains chemically stable indefinitely. The hard candy manufacturing process involves boiling sugar syrup to temperatures above 300 degrees Fahrenheit, which drives off virtually all water and creates a glass-like amorphous sugar solid. Without water, microbial life cannot establish itself, and without microbial activity, the candy does not spoil in any meaningful biological sense. The practical shelf life limitation is texture and appearance, not safety. Exposed to humidity, hard candy absorbs moisture from the air and becomes sticky, then wet, then syrupy. Stored dry, it simply sits in chemical stasis. Archaeological evidence suggests that candy-like confections from ancient civilizations were still technically edible centuries later. Not appetizing, but not dangerous. From a practical preparedness standpoint, pure hard candy serves multiple roles. It is a concentrated, fast-burning source of simple carbohydrates, useful for immediate energy. It is a morale item, providing something sweet during a difficult period when that psychological comfort matters more than people expect. And it is a trade or barter item, historically valuable in disruption scenarios, precisely because it is compact, stable, and universally desirable. How to store them. Remove hard candy from its original bag and store in sealed glass mason jars with tight-fitting lids or vacuum seal in Mylar bags. Avoid any candy with added fat, chocolate, caramel, as these dramatically reduce shelf life. Pure fruit-flavored or mint-hard candies are ideal. Keep in a cool, dry location away from temperature extremes. A quart mason jar of hard candy weighs about 2 pounds and stores almost indefinitely in proper conditions. Worcestershire sauce. Worcestershire sauce earns its place on this list through a combination of high acidity, high sodium, and a significant vinegar content that collectively create an environment where spoilage organisms simply cannot function. A properly sealed bottle of Worcestershire sauce will last indefinitely, or very close to it, when stored correctly. The original Leah and Perrin's recipe, which remains the dominant commercial formulation, contains malt vinegar, spirit vinegar, molasses, sugar, salt, anchovies, tamarind extract, onions, garlic, and spices. The double vinegar base drives pH down into the range of 3.5 to 4.0, well below the threshold of 4.6 at which most harmful bacteria can survive. The salt content adds osmotic pressure that further inhibits microbial growth. The molasses contributes antioxidant compounds that slow chemical deterioration. Commercially sealed Worcestershire sauce typically carries a best by date of 3 to 5 years. But this is driven by marketing and regulatory convention rather than actual safety or quality limits. Properly stored, unopened Worcestershire sauce remains fully effective for 10 or more years. Opened bottles, stored refrigerated or in a cool pantry, degrade slowly over years. Flavor muting somewhat, but remaining safe and usable for far longer than most households ever need. The practical value of Worcestershire sauce in a long-term food storage context is as a flavor intensifier. A small amount added to soups, bean dishes, grain bowls, or reconstituted foods adds depth and umami complexity that makes simple stored foods significantly more palatable. It is compact, concentrated, and adds disproportionate culinary value per unit of storage space. How to store them? Buy in the largest bottle format available. The 20-ounce bottle is far more economical per ounce than smaller sizes. Store sealed bottles in a cool, dark pantry. Once opened, refrigerate or store in a cool environment. A case of 6 large bottles takes up minimal space and represents years of supply for a typical household. Item 26. Soy sauce. Soy sauce is among the oldest continuously consumed fermented foods in human history, with its origins in China dating back over 2,500 years. Its extraordinary stability is not accidental. It is the direct result of a fermentation and preservation process that essentially completes itself during manufacture, leaving a product that has already passed through microbial transformation and emerged on the other side in a chemically stable state. Traditional soy sauce is produced by fermenting soybeans and roasted wheat with the mold Aspergillus oryzae, then combining the resulting koi with salt and fermenting for months or years. The finished product contains approximately 14 to 18% sodium by volume, an extreme salt concentration that prevents virtually all spoilage organisms from surviving. Its pH is typically around 4.8, adding mild acidity as a secondary preservative barrier. Commercially produced soy sauce uses an accelerated hydrolysis process rather than traditional fermentation, but achieves similar chemistry. High sodium, low pH, low water activity that confers the same long shelf life. An unopened, commercially sealed bottle of sauce will last indefinitely at room temperature. Once opened, it oxidizes and flavor shifts over time, darker and more concentrated, but remains safe and usable for years. Refrigerating opened soy sauce dramatically extends its useful flavor life. From a supply chain perspective, soy sauce is primarily manufactured in China, Japan, and South Korea, with significant production in Southeast Asia. The major brands available in the U.S., Kikkoman, Lee Kum Kee, Yamasa, have relatively stable supply chains, but soybean costs and shipping logistics create periodic price pressure. Buying a year or more of supply when prices are low is a straightforward and cost-effective strategy. How to store them? Unopened bottles keep indefinitely. Opened bottles should be stored in the refrigerator once the bottle is half empty. For maximum storage efficiency, purchase in the largest available format. A gallon jug of soy sauce stores well, takes up minimal space, and provides a year or more of typical cooking use. A small amount of soy sauce added to virtually any savory dish adds sodium, umami, and complexity that dramatically elevates the palatability of simple stored foods. Item 25. Apple cider vinegar. Apple cider vinegar has been used as a food, medicine, and preservative for thousands of years, and its durability is grounded in the same fundamental chemistry that makes all vinegars shelf-stable. Acidity so extreme that no pathogen can survive in it, and so low in usable water that microbial growth is simply not possible. Raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar, the variety with the visible mother, the colony of beneficial bacteria and yeast left over from fermentation, contains approximately 5% acetic acid, giving it a pH of around 2.5. This is more acidic than most forms of stomach acid. Nothing harmful survives in it. The misconception about raw apple cider vinegar's shelf life is widespread. Many people see the floating sediment and murky appearance and assume the product has expired. The opposite is true. Raw ACV is self-preserving. The mother is simply a pellicle of cellulose and acetic acid bacteria that naturally forms in living vinegar. It does not indicate spoilage. Filtered, clear apple cider vinegar is equally shelf-stable, but lacks the probiotic components that some users value. Commercially sealed apple cider vinegar will last indefinitely on a shelf. This has been verified repeatedly by food scientists. Bragg, the most recognized brand in the U.S. market, does not print an expiration date on its product for this reason. It simply states to store in a cool, dark place. Beyond its extraordinary shelf life, apple cider vinegar is a versatile pantry item. A cooking acid, a pickling medium, allowing you to extend the life of other foods, a cleaning agent, and in high acidity form, a water acidifier that can be used in small quantities to treat water for storage. How to store them? Sealed glass bottles are ideal. Apple cider vinegar is stable in plastic, but glass preserves flavor better over very long storage. Buy in 1-gallon jugs and store in a cool, dark pantry. A gallon of ACV is roughly $10 at most grocery stores and represents years of supply for the average household. Item 24. Distilled white vinegar. Distilled white vinegar takes the same chemistry as apple cider vinegar and strips it down to its most elemental form, a solution of approximately 5% acetic acid in water. No organic compounds, no sugars, no residual fermentation products, just acid and water. The result is a product with essentially infinite shelf life and the broadest range of practical applications of any liquid in a preparedness pantry. The acidity of distilled white vinegar, pH around 2.4, makes it lethal to virtually all pathogens. Salmonella, E. coli, Listeria, and most other foodborne organisms cannot survive in it. This same property makes it the most effective and safest household cleaner for surfaces that will contact food, a safer alternative to bleach for many disinfection tasks, and the medium of choice for home pickling and canning, extending the life of other foods by months or years. A gallon of distilled white vinegar at retail costs approximately $3 to $4. It has no meaningful expiration. It takes up minimal storage space. Its utility spans cooking, cleaning, laundry treatment, and emergency food preservation. By almost any measure, distilled white vinegar is the highest practical value per dollar item in a preparedness pantry, and most households have at most one bottle. From a supply chain perspective, white vinegar is produced domestically in large volumes from grain alcohol, with relatively stable manufacturing. It is not subject to the same import dependency risks as many other pantry items, making it one of the more supply chain resilient options on this list. How to store them? Buy in 1-gallon or 5-gallon jugs for storage efficiency. Keep sealed in a cool, dark location. Vinegar can be stored almost anywhere without concern. It does not require refrigeration, temperature control beyond avoiding freezing, or any special conditions. A modest storage goal is 10 to 20 gallons, which provides cleaning, cooking, and food preservation capacity for years. Item 23. Pure maple syrup. Pure maple syrup. Not pancake syrup, not maple-flavored corn syrup, but 100% pure maple syrup. Contains approximately 66% sugar by weight. a concentration high enough to prevent almost all microbial activity through osmotic inhibition. Bacteria and mold require available water to grow. At 66% sugar concentration, so much of the available water is bound to sugar molecules that almost none remains free for microbial use. Commercially canned or bottled pure maple syrup, sealed before opening, will last for many years to decades, at room temperature and essentially indefinitely if refrigerated. The USDA reports that properly stored, unopened pure maple syrup remains safe and of good quality indefinitely. This is among the stronger shelf life statements in all of food science, and it is grounded in sound chemistry. The practical limitation is mold growth on the surface of opened containers. Once exposed to air and ambient mold spores, the surface of syrup in an opened container can develop a film of mold in warm, humid conditions. This mold is generally not dangerous and can be scooped off. The remaining syrup, after skimming and bringing to a brief boil, is safe and excellent. But sealed containers do not have this problem. Pure maple syrup is also one of the few genuinely nutritious sweeteners. It contains manganese, zinc, potassium, calcium, and antioxidant phenolic compounds at meaningful levels. This nutritional profile adds to its value in a long-term food storage context where micronutrient diversity can become challenging. Regarding supply chain, over 70% of the world's maple syrup production comes from Quebec, Canada. Climate change is shifting the maple sugar season northward and creating year-to-year production variability. Maple syrup prices have increased meaningfully in recent years and are likely to continue rising. How to store them? Buy pure maple syrup in tin cans for maximum shelf life. The tin format used by large quantity buyers protects better than glass against light degradation. Store sealed at room temperature, or freeze for essentially unlimited storage. Freezing syrup does not damage it and extends quality indefinitely. A 1-gallon tin of pure maple syrup is an excellent stockpile investment. Item 22. Cornstarch. Cornstarch is pure carbohydrate. Essentially no fat, no protein, minimal moisture, and in that chemical simplicity lies its extraordinary stability. A properly sealed container of cornstarch stored in a cool, dry environment will last indefinitely. There is nothing in it that can oxidize, ferment, or provide nutrition to microorganisms. Cornstarch is produced by wet milling corn kernels, separating the starch from the fiber, protein, and oil, and drying it to a very low moisture content, typically under 12% and often lower in commercial packaging. The resulting powder is chemically inert under normal storage conditions. It does not react with oxygen, does not support microbial growth, and does not degrade into anything harmful. The primary threat to stored cornstarch is moisture and insects. If moisture infiltrates the package, the powder can clump and potentially support mold growth. If pantry insects, grain weevils in particular, penetrate the packaging, they can colonize it. Both problems are fully preventable with proper storage. Cornstarch's culinary value in a long-term storage context is primarily as a thickener. A small amount transforms thin liquids into sauces, gravies, and soups, dramatically improving the palatability and psychological satisfaction of simple meals. It is also a replacement for eggs in some baking applications, and a component of gluten-free baking. From a supply chain standpoint, cornstarch is produced primarily from U.S. corn, which is among the most abundant and domestically secure agricultural commodities. This makes cornstarch one of the least supply chain vulnerable items on this list. How to store them? Transfer from the original cardboard canister into an airtight glass jar, sealed Mylar bag with oxygen absorber, or food-grade plastic container with a snap-tight lid. The cardboard canister that cornstarch is sold in absorbs ambient humidity over time and does not protect against insects. Properly repackaged, cornstarch stored in a cool, dry environment will last at minimum 20 to 30 years, with no meaningful degradation. Item 21. Baking soda. Baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, is a pure mineral compound, not a processed food, not a fermented product, not an agricultural derivative, a mineral. And minerals do not expire. Sodium bicarbonate is mined primarily from trona deposits, massive underground beds of naturally occurring sodium carbonate that formed from evaporated ancient lake beds, with the largest deposits in Wyoming's Green River Formation. It is refined and packaged, but the core compound is entirely natural and chemically stable. In practical terms, baking soda never expires in the sense of becoming unsafe. The question is whether it retains its leavening effectiveness, which depends on whether it has been exposed to moisture or acids that trigger premature reaction. Stored in an airtight container away from humidity, baking soda remains fully effective as a leavening agent for many years, decades in proper storage. The broader household utility of baking soda makes it extraordinarily valuable beyond just baking. It is an effective deodorizer, a mild abrasive cleaner, a toothpaste substitute, an antacid, a fire suppressant for small grease fires, and a pH buffer for pool and aquarium water. This multiplicity of functions makes it one of the most versatile items per unit of storage space in any preparedness pantry. Commercial baking soda packages typically carry a best-by date of 2 to 3 years, but this is conservative and primarily driven by the fact that opened packages, stored in a damp pantry, do gradually lose effectiveness. Sealed, properly stored baking soda tests as fully effective for far longer. How to store them. Transfer from the original packaging into sealed glass mason jars or vacuum-sealed foil bags. Store multiple small containers rather than one large one, so that opening one container for daily use does not expose the rest of your supply to humidity. Buy in bulk. A 13.5-pound bag of Arm & Hammer baking soda from a warehouse store is extremely economical, and properly repackaged represents years of supply. Item 20. Whole peppercorns and whole dried spices. Whole spices, peppercorns, cloves, cinnamon sticks, dried chili peppers, coriander seeds, cumin seeds, allspice berries, and similar whole dried spices deserve a specific place on this list separate from ground spices because their shelf life is dramatically superior. While ground spices lose potency within 1 to 3 years due to the dramatically increased surface area exposed to oxygen, whole spices sealed in airtight containers retain their essential oils and flavor compounds for 10, 20, or more years. The mechanism is straightforward. The outer husk of a whole spice, seed, or berry acts as a natural protective barrier, sealing the volatile essential oils inside. As long as that barrier is intact, oxidation proceeds only from the outside in, at a rate many times slower than what occurs with ground powder. When you grind a whole peppercorn fresh, you smell the immediate release of those protected oils. That smell is the evidence of preserved potency. Archaeologists have found ancient spices in Egyptian tombs that were identifiable, and, while not culinary grade, demonstrated the remarkable preservation potential of whole dried botanicals in low-humidity environments. More practically, many professional chefs and food scientists have confirmed that whole spices stored in sealed, dark containers for 10 or more years can be ground to reveal flavor profiles still superior to commercially ground spices purchased at retail. Black peppercorns deserve special mention because they are among the most universally used spices and have one of the longest track records as a long-term stored commodity. Historically, peppercorns were literally used as currency. Their compactness, stability, and universal value made them one of the most traded commodities in pre-modern commerce. How to store them. Buy whole spices in bulk. Restaurant supply stores and online spice retailers sell peppercorns and other spices by the pound at a fraction of the per-ounce cost of retail jars. Store in sealed glass mason jars in a cool, dark pantry. invest in a quality burr grinder for fresh grinding. A pound of quality whole black peppercorn stored in a sealed jar represents years of supply at typical household use rates. Item 19. Instant coffee. Coffee lovers will find this item practical. Everyone else will find it valuable for different reasons. Instant coffee, freeze-dried or spray-dried, concentrated brewed coffee, has a shelf life of 15 to 25 years when sealed and stored properly, making it one of the most shelf-stable caffeine sources available. The mechanism behind instant coffee's longevity is the same low-moisture principle that governs many foods on this list. Both freeze-dried and spray-dried instant coffee are processed to moisture content well below 3%, eliminating the water activity that would allow microbial growth or enzymatic degradation. The coffee compounds, primarily caffeine, chlorogenic acids, and Maillard reaction products, are chemically stable in dry form at normal storage temperatures. Caffeine itself is an alkaloid compound with essentially indefinite shelf life in dry form. This is relevant beyond flavor. In a disruption scenario, the physiological effects of caffeine, alertness, reduced fatigue perception, improved focus, have genuine functional value. For individuals who consume caffeine regularly, sudden withdrawal also causes significant headaches and reduced function that can impair decision-making and physical capability at exactly the wrong time. A stockpile of instant coffee addresses both points simultaneously. From a supply chain standpoint, coffee, both regular and instant, is one of the more vulnerable categories. Brazil and Vietnam supply the majority of global coffee, and both countries have experienced significant weather disruptions in recent years. Brazil's frost events in 2021 damaged a substantial percentage of its coffee crop and contributed to global price spikes that roughly doubled retail coffee prices over 2 years. Those structural pressures have not fully resolved. How to store them. Instant coffee sealed in a vacuum-packed tin or glass jar stores for 15 or more years. Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers are the best format for bulk storage. Buy in bulk tins and transfer any loose product to sealed glass or Mylar. Freeze-dried instant coffee. Brands like Mount Hagen, Café Altura, or Starbucks Via generally has better flavor than spray-dried varieties. A 1-pound tin of freeze-dried instant coffee, properly stored, represents hundreds of servings. Item 18. Cocoa powder pure. Unsweetened cocoa powder, the kind used for baking and hot chocolate, is one of the longest-lasting pantry items available, with a shelf life of 3 to 5 years in standard storage and up to 20 or more years when properly sealed with oxygen absorbers in a cool environment. The durability of cocoa powder comes from its very low moisture content and the extraordinary concentration of antioxidant polyphenols, flavonols, and procyanidins that give dark chocolate and cocoa their distinctive properties. These antioxidants, as the name suggests, inhibit oxidation reactions that would otherwise degrade flavor and nutrition. Cocoa is essentially protecting itself from spoilage through its own chemistry. Pure cocoa powder contains no added fats beyond the naturally occurring cocoa butter residue left after pressing, which is minimal in Dutch processed varieties. Fat oxidation is the primary degradation pathway for most stored foods, and cocoa's minimal fat content, combined with its high antioxidant load, makes it exceptionally resistant to this process. Beyond its baking applications, cocoa powder provides genuine nutritional value in a long-term food storage context. It is rich in iron, magnesium, zinc, manganese, and copper, minerals that can become deficient in a diet centered on white rice and dried beans. A tablespoon of cocoa powder in hot water provides a psychologically important warm, flavored beverage that addresses morale in ways that are genuinely underappreciated until morale actually matters. How to store them. Transfer cocoa powder from its original packaging into a sealed glass jar or vacuum-sealed mylar bag with an oxygen absorber. The original cardboard packaging is not sufficient for long-term storage, as it allows oxygen and humidity infiltration. Dutch processed cocoa, darker, milder, less bitter, and natural cocoa powder both store equally well. Buy from a restaurant supply or bulk food source for significant cost savings over retail. Item 17. Powdered milk commercially produced non-fat dry milk powder, properly packaged and stored, has a shelf life of 2 to 5 years at room temperature and 20 to 25 years in optimal storage conditions, sealed in foil pouches or cans with oxygen absorbers, kept at or below 70 degrees Fahrenheit. This range of shelf life is wider than almost any other food on this list, reflecting how dramatically storage conditions affect the actual outcome. Non-fat dry milk is produced by spray-drying pasteurized, homogenized skim milk. The fat is removed before drying because milk fat oxidizes. It goes rancid, and would otherwise limit shelf life to a fraction of what fat-free powder achieves. The resulting powder, with fat removed and moisture driven down to less than 4%, is stable for years under ordinary conditions and for decades under optimal ones. The nutritional case for dry milk powder in a long-term food storage pantry is strong. It provides protein, calcium, vitamins D and B12, riboflavin, and phosphorus, a broad nutrient profile that complements grain and legume-based diets significantly. When reconstituted with water and added to beans, rice, or grain dishes, it provides amino acids that complete the protein profiles of plant-based foods. For children especially, adequate calcium and vitamin D are critical, and dry milk powder is among the most practical ways to ensure access to both in a disruption scenario. Whole dry milk powder stores less well than non-fat, but whole fat varieties, particularly commercially spray-dried whole milk, can last 3 to 5 years in foil pouches, longer when refrigerated or frozen. How to store them? Purchase non-fat dry milk powder in sealed foil pouches or tin cans from emergency food suppliers. Brands like Thrive Life, Augusten Farms, or Mountain House sell certified long shelf life products. Store in a consistently cool location. The single biggest factor in achieving maximum shelf life is temperature. A 25-pound bucket of non-fat dry milk powder provides hundreds of quarts of reconstituted milk. Item 16. Dried pasta. Dried pasta, spaghetti, penne, rigatoni, egg noodles, and the dozens of other shapes in the dried pasta category occupies a special position in long-term food storage because it is calorie-dense, familiar, versatile, and nearly universally acceptable to children and adults alike. The morale dimension of pasta in a disruption scenario is significant. It is comfort food in nearly every culture that has adopted it. The shelf life of dried pasta is driven by the same low moisture principle governing most of this list. Commercial dried pasta is manufactured to a moisture content of approximately 12.5%, the minimum required for USDA certification, and often lower. At these moisture levels, microbial growth is impossible. Pasta does not contain fat in significant quantities. Egg pasta contains some, which is why egg noodles store somewhat less well than semolina pasta, so oxidative rancidity is not a significant degradation pathway. Semolina pasta, made from durum wheat semolina and water, nothing else is the most shelf-stable variety. Stored in its original sealed packaging in a cool, dry environment, semolina pasta remains safe and of good quality for 3 to 5 years. Vacuum-sealed, or transferred to mylar bags with oxygen absorbers, the shelf life extends to 8 to 10 years or more, with minimal degradation in texture or nutritional value. Italy produces approximately 3 million tons of pasta annually and exports globally, making it a significant international supply chain. In 2022, the combination of a Russian wheat supply disruption, energy cost increases for Italian pasta factories, and drought affecting Italian durum wheat harvests created a supply crunch that pushed pasta prices to record levels in Europe and contributed to elevated U.S. prices as well. These vulnerabilities persist. How to store them? Buy semolina pasta in bulk. A 20-pound case of spaghetti or pen from a restaurant supply store is both economical and storage efficient. For extended storage, vacuum seal in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers. Store in a cool, dark location. A 20-pound case of dried pasta provides approximately 160 servings. At 400 calories per serving, this represents 64,000 calories of stored energy in a package smaller than a small suitcase. Item 15. Lard and tallow rendered animal fat. Lard from pork, tallow from beef is one of the oldest preserved foods in human history. Before refrigeration, rendered fat was how many cultures stored cooking fat through seasons and across years. Before the mid-20th century demonization of saturated animal fat, lard was the dominant cooking fat in American kitchens. And from a pure chemistry standpoint, rendered and properly sealed animal fat remains one of the most shelf-stable cooking fats available. The key distinction is between properly rendered fat and raw fat. Raw animal fat contains residual water and proteins that support microbial growth and rapid spoilage. Properly rendered fat, cooked at sufficient temperature to drive off all water and strain out all protein solids, is nearly anhydrous and nearly protein-free. Without water and without protein, spoilage organisms have no substrate. The remaining material is essentially pure fat. The oxidative stability of lard and tallow, their resistance to going rancid, is higher than most vegetable oils because saturated and monounsaturated fats are chemically more stable than polyunsaturated fats. Oxidation, which is what causes rancidity, preferentially attacks double bonds in fatty acid chains. Saturated fats have no double bonds. Monounsaturated fats have one. Polyunsaturated fats, such as those dominant in soybean oil, corn oil, and sunflower oil, have multiple double bonds and oxidize far faster. Commercially sealed lard and tallow, stored in sealed tins away from light and heat, have a practical shelf life of 2 to 4 years at room temperature. Stored in a consistently cool environment, 55 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, this extends to 5 or more years. Frozen lard and tallow store essentially indefinitely. How to store them? Purchase commercially rendered lard or beef tallow in sealed tins. Manteca is a commonly available shelf-stable lard brand at many grocery stores. For maximum shelf life, store tins in a cool, dark location or freeze. Properly rendered and stored, animal fat provides an extraordinarily calorie-dense cooking medium. At 9 calories per gram, fat contains more than twice the caloric density of carbohydrates or protein. Item 14. Freeze-dried foods. Freeze-dried food occupies a special category on this list because it is the only process technology that genuinely delivers multiple decade shelf life across a broad range of food types, including fruits, vegetables, meats, and complete meals that would otherwise be impossible to store long-term in edible form. Freeze-drying works by freezing food and then placing it in a vacuum chamber where the frozen water sublimes, converts directly from ice to water vapor, without passing through a liquid phase. The result removes 98 to 99% of the food's moisture content while leaving the cellular structure, flavor compounds, and nutritional profile largely intact. When properly sealed in nitrogen-flushed cans with oxygen absorbers, the resulting product is shelf-stable for 25 to 30 years. This is not marketing hyperbole. Studies conducted by Brigham Young University and Oregon State University on freeze-dried food stored for multiple decades have found that protein, vitamin C, and vitamin A retention at 25 years remain high in properly processed and sealed products. The technology has been validated by NASA for space food by the military for long-range rations, and by emergency food manufacturers who stake their business model on the 30-year claim. The primary limitation of freeze-dried food is cost. On a calorie per dollar basis, freeze-dried food is among the most expensive foods on this list, typically 5 to 15 times the cost of equivalent dried beans or rice. This makes it impractical as a primary calorie source for most households, but ideal for specific categories: nutritionally dense vegetables and fruits that cannot be stored any other way, lean protein sources like chicken and ground beef, and complete meal options that provide dietary variety and morale when simpler staples become psychologically difficult to eat every day. How to store them. Purchase from established brands. Mountain House, Thrive Life, Legacy Food Storage, and Augusten Farms are among the more reputable producers. Focus first on vegetables and proteins. These are the hardest categories to supply from other storage methods. Store sealed cans in a consistent, moderate temperature environment. Avoid temperature cycling. Item 13. Rolled oats and steel-cut oats are among the most nutritionally complete whole grains, providing a blend of complex carbohydrates, soluble fiber, specifically beta-glucan, protein, healthy fats, and a range of minerals including magnesium, phosphorus, manganese, and iron. They are also among the most shelf-stable whole grains available, with properly stored rolled oats lasting 2 to 5 years in commercial packaging, and steel-cut oats lasting 5 or more years in ideal conditions. The reason oats store well, though not as long as white rice, is that they have had the outer bran layer removed and the grain heated during processing, which deactivates the lipase enzymes that would otherwise rapidly oxidize the grain's natural fats. Raw oat groats with bran intact store far less well. Rolled oats and steel-cut oats have undergone enough processing to substantially reduce enzymatic activity while retaining most nutritional value. The practical, caloric value of oats is exceptional. A pound of rolled oats contains approximately 700 calories, at a retail cost of under $2 per pound in bulk, giving an energy-to-cost ratio that is difficult to match. Combined with their significant protein content, a cup of cooked oats provides 6 grams, their high fiber content, which contributes to satiety and digestive health, and their extraordinary versatility in both sweet and savory preparations, oats represent one of the most valuable whole food investments per dollar in any storage pantry. From a supply chain standpoint, oat production is concentrated in Canada, Russia, and the northern United States, with Canada being the dominant global exporter. Climate events in key growing regions, particularly the severe Canadian drought of 2021, which reduced oat production by approximately 40%, can create significant price spikes and supply tightness with very little warning. How to store them. Transfer oats from their original cardboard packaging into sealed food-grade, taped buckets with Gamma Seal lids, or vacuum-sealed Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers. A 5-gallon bucket holds approximately 30 pounds of rolled oats, approximately 51,000 calories of stored energy. Steel-cut oats, which have undergone less processing, retain nutritional value better over time, but require longer cooking. Store in a cool, consistently dry environment. Item 12. Dried beans and legumes. Dried beans, lentils, split peas, black-eyed peas, chickpeas, and other legumes are among the most nutritionally complete foods available for long-term storage. They provide substantial protein, complex carbohydrates, soluble and insoluble fiber, iron, zinc, folate, magnesium, and potassium. A nutritional profile that complements grain-based diets almost perfectly, addressing the amino acid gaps that make grains nutritionally incomplete as a sole protein source. The shelf life of dried legumes is long but nuanced. Dried beans stored in sealed containers at room temperature remain safe and nutritious for 25 years or more. However, There is an important distinction between safety and cookability. After approximately 5 to 8 years of storage, dried beans begin hardening. The seed coat toughens and the interior proteins denature in ways that make the beans increasingly resistant to softening during cooking. Very old beans may require hours of additional cooking time and still fail to reach a fully soft texture. This is not a safety issue. Old beans are not harmful. It is a palatability and practical cooking issue. For food that will actually be eaten and enjoyed, a rotation strategy that cycles through bean stocks within 3 to 5 years is optimal. For pure caloric emergency storage, beans remain viable far longer than any conventional expiration timeline. Lentils and split peas are superior to whole dried beans for one specific reason. They cook without soaking in approximately 15 to 30 minutes, compared to 1 to 2 hours for soaked beans and 3 or more hours for unsoaked. In a disruption scenario where fuel for cooking may be limited, this efficiency difference is practically significant. How to store them? Purchase in 25 to 50-pound bags from a restaurant supply or bulk foods retailer for maximum economy. Transfer to sealed, food-grade DP buckets with gamma lids or Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers. The oxygen absorber is critical. It not only extends shelf life, but eliminates residual oxygen that supports insect egg hatching. A 5-gallon bucket holds approximately 30 to 33 pounds of dried beans. Item 11. Hard winter wheat berries, whole, intact wheat berries. The complete grain kernel, including germ, bran, and endosperm, represent the gold standard of long-term grain storage, outperforming white rice in nutritional completeness while achieving comparable shelf life when properly sealed. Hard red winter wheat and hard white wheat berries, sealed in food-grade containers with oxygen absorbers, have a verified shelf life of 25 to 30 years. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which has one of the most extensively tested and documented long-term food storage programs in the world, has published research confirming that wheat berries, properly sealed in cans with oxygen absorbers, retain high nutritional value for decades. Samples of stored wheat tested after 25 years have been found to germinate and sprout, confirming biological viability and nutritional integrity. The key advantage of whole wheat berries over white flour is the intact germ. White flour has the germ removed during milling, which extends flour's shelf life but eliminates the fat-soluble vitamins, essential fatty acids, and additional minerals concentrated in the germ. Whole wheat berries retain all of these while simultaneously lasting longer than the flour milled from them, because the intact outer hull protects the germ from oxidation. The practical requirement for whole wheat berries is a grain mill. Wheat berries are not edible in their raw state. They must be cooked whole, as a grain bowl, slow-cooked porridge, or wheat berry salad, sprouted, or ground into flour. A quality hand-crank grain mill, capable of operating without electricity, transforms wheat berries into fresh flour, cornmeal, oat flour, and bean flour. This piece of equipment is arguably as important as the wheat itself. How to store them? Purchase hard red winter wheat or hard white wheat from emergency food suppliers. Wheat Montana, Honeyville, and Azure Standard are reliable sources. Store in sealed 5-gallon food-grade buckets with Mylar liners and oxygen absorbers. A 5-gallon bucket holds approximately 37 pounds of wheat berries, sufficient to produce roughly 28 pounds of flour. Item 10. Ghee. Ghee is clarified butter that has had both water and milk solids removed through a slow cooking and straining process, leaving behind pure, golden butterfat. The result of this purification is one of the most shelf-stable cooking fats available, a product that outperforms regular butter by years or decades in shelf life while retaining all of butter's rich, complex flavor. Regular butter contains approximately 16 to 18% water, and approximately 1 to 2% milk solids, primarily proteins and lactose. These components make butter susceptible to both microbial spoilage and enzymatic degradation. Remove them, and you are left with a product that is stable at room temperature for 6 to 12 months when sealed, and for 1 to 2 years in a refrigerator, and for essentially indefinite periods when frozen. Commercial ghee, produced to food-grade standards and sealed in airtight glass jars or tins, has a room temperature shelf life of 1 to 2 years when properly stored and protected from light. This is vastly superior to regular butter. In India, where ghee has been produced and consumed for thousands of years, aged ghees of 5, 10, and even 20 years are considered medicinal delicacies of extraordinary value. This long tradition reflects the product's genuine stability under proper conditions. From a nutrition standpoint, ghee is a rich source of fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K2, as well as butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid with significant gut health and anti-inflammatory properties that becomes particularly valuable during periods of dietary restriction. The high caloric density of ghee, approximately 130 calories per tablespoon, makes it an excellent energy-dense addition to any stored diet. How to store them? Purchase commercial ghee in glass jars from a grocery store or warehouse club. Anchor Brand and Organic Valley both produce shelf-stable commercial ghee. For maximum shelf life, store sealed glass jars in a cool, dark pantry and avoid exposure to light. Open jars stored at room temperature should be used within 3 months. A 12-ounce jar of ghee represents substantial cooking fat for a family and is economically priced at most retailers. Item 9. Refined coconut oil, specifically refined, commercially processed coconut oil, achieves its remarkable shelf life through the same mechanism as ghee and lard, an extremely high concentration of saturated fatty acids that are chemically resistant to oxidation. Approximately 90% of coconut oil's fat content is saturated, giving it the highest saturated fat percentage of any commonly available cooking fat. This exceptional saturation level makes it significantly more oxidatively stable than any common vegetable oil. Refined coconut oil, properly sealed in an airtight container, has a shelf life of 2 to 5 years at room temperature and extends further when stored in cool conditions. Unlike extra virgin coconut oil, refined coconut oil has a neutral flavor profile. It doesn't impart the coconut taste that some find objectionable in savory cooking, while retaining the same shelf life advantages. Both varieties store well, but refined is more versatile for general cooking. Coconut oil is solid at temperatures below 76 degrees Fahrenheit and liquid above that threshold. This transition is not an indication of spoilage. It is simply the normal phase change of saturated fat, just like butter transitioning between solid and liquid. Coconut oil can be repeatedly cycled between solid and liquid states without any degradation. From a supply chain perspective, over 75% of global coconut oil production comes from just 3 countries: Indonesia, the Philippines, and India. The Philippines, the world's largest coconut oil exporter, has experienced repeated production disruptions tied to typhoon seasons, El Niño-related drought, and the aging of coconut plantations. The average Philippine coconut palm is approximately 60 years old and well past peak productivity. These structural factors make coconut oil supplies and prices more volatile than most consumers realize. How to store them? Purchase refined coconut oil in bulk 5-gallon pails from food service suppliers or online retailers. This format is significantly more economical per ounce than retail jars and more storage efficient. Sealed pails stored in a cool location will remain at peak quality for 2 to 3 years and remain perfectly usable beyond that. A 5-gallon pail of coconut oil represents a year or more of cooking fat for a typical family. Item 8. Pure vanilla extract. Pure vanilla extract belongs on this list for a specific chemical reason. It contains approximately 35% alcohol by volume, the federally mandated minimum for vanilla extract sold in the United States. Alcohol at that concentration is a self-preserving solvent. It does not expire. The vanilla compounds dissolved in it, primarily vanillin and hundreds of other flavor molecules extracted from vanilla beans, remain stable in solution essentially indefinitely. The FDA standard of identity for pure vanilla extract requires a minimum of 35% ethyl alcohol and a specific concentration of vanilla bean solids per gallon. Below 35% alcohol content, a product cannot legally be labeled pure vanilla extract. Above 35%, which most commercial extracts are, at 40 to 42%, the shelf stability only increases. A sealed bottle of pure vanilla extract, stored in a cool, dark pantry, will remain of excellent quality for decades. Professional bakers report using vanilla extract of 15 or 20 years of age and finding its flavor superior to fresh extract as the vanilla compounds continue to develop and integrate over time. This is one of the rare instances where a food item actually improves with proper long-term storage. From a supply chain standpoint, vanilla is one of the most supply chain vulnerable ingredients in the food industry. Madagascar produces approximately 80% of the world's vanilla beans, making global supply highly concentrated and vulnerable to weather disruptions, political instability, and export policy. Vanilla prices have historically been among the most volatile of any food commodity, swinging from $20 per kilogram to $600 per kilogram within a few years depending on crop conditions. This volatility makes stocking a significant supply of pure vanilla extract a genuine hedge against future price spikes. How to store them? Pure vanilla extract in a sealed dark glass bottle, stored in a cool pantry, is essentially immortal. Buy quality pure extract, not imitation vanilla, which is a synthetic vanillin solution with significantly shorter shelf life. In the largest bottles available, store in dark glass or in a dark pantry to prevent light degradation of the vanilla compounds. Item 7. White rice. White rice is one of the most important long-term food storage staples in the world, the foundation of emergency food supplies maintained by governments, militaries, and households across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Its shelf life of 25 to 30 years when properly sealed makes it a cornerstone of any serious long-term food storage plan. The reason white rice stores so much better than brown rice, despite having lower nutritional value, is the milling process that removes the bran and germ. Brown rice retains its outer bran layer, which contains oils that oxidize and go rancid within 6 to 12 months. White rice, stripped of those oils, has almost no fat to oxidize. Combined with its naturally low moisture content of about 12%, white rice in a sealed, oxygen-free environment is extraordinarily stable. The Latter-day Saints Grain Storage Testing Program, which is the most extensive long-term food storage research conducted by any civilian organization, has produced data confirming that white rice sealed in cans with oxygen absorbers maintains nutritional value and palatability for 30 years. Independent studies have replicated similar results. At approximately $0.50 per pound purchased in bulk, white rice provides approximately 1,600 calories per pound, making it one of the most calorie-dense and economical foods available anywhere. A 50-pound bag of white rice represents 80,000 calories of stored energy, sufficient to supply us a single person's caloric needs for approximately 40 days at 2,000 calories per day. How to store them? Transfer bulk white rice into sealed Mylar bags inside food-grade DB buckets. A Mylar bag sealed with a hot iron, with a 2,000 cc oxygen absorber inside, creates a nearly perfect storage environment. Each 5-gallon bucket holds approximately 35 pounds of white rice. Store in a cool, consistently dry location. The number one enemy of stored white rice is temperature. Every 10-degree Fahrenheit increase in storage, temperature roughly halves the effective shelf life. Item 6. White sugar is, at its chemical foundation, a pure organic compound, sucrose, a disaccharide assembled from one glucose molecule and one fructose molecule. In its pure, dry, crystalline form, it has no meaningful expiration date. Archaeologists have found recognizable sugar in ancient tombs. Commercial white sugar sealed in its original packaging has been tested for decades without meaningful degradation. The scientific basis for sugar's immortality as a stored food is simple. Microorganisms require water to grow. Pure white sugar contains essentially zero free water. All available water molecules are chemically bound to sugar crystals in a way that makes them unavailable to microbial life. Without available water, nothing biological can happen to it. There is nothing to ferment, nothing to oxidize in a meaningful sense, and nothing to decay. White sugar's limitations as a long-term storage item are minor. It absorbs moisture from humid air and can clump. But clumped sugar is chemically identical to granulated sugar. It just requires breaking apart. It can absorb odors from strong-smelling materials stored nearby, and ants find it irresistible, making secure containment important. The nutritional limitation of white sugar is well known. It provides calories without vitamins, minerals, or fiber. But in a long-term food storage context, pure caloric density has significant value. Sugar can make otherwise unpalatable foods edible. It supports baking and fermentation, including the fermentation of vinegar, which requires sugar as a substrate, and it provides the fast-burning glucose energy that the brain and muscles demand under stress. How to store them. Transfer from original paper bags into sealed food-grade containers. A sealed oak-deepy bucket or glass jar is ideal. The original paper packaging absorbs ambient moisture and is not suitable for long-term storage. A 25-pound bag of white sugar transferred to a sealed bucket will store indefinitely. A long-term sugar supply of 50 to 100 pounds is reasonable for a household of 4. Item 5. Salt. Salt is a mineral, not a food that was once alive. Not a processed agricultural product. A mineral extracted from the earth or from the sea. Composed of sodium chloride molecules, arranged in a crystalline lattice. Minerals do not expire. Minerals do not go bad. Salt that formed 250 million years ago in ancient Permian seabeds is chemically identical to salt extracted from the ocean today. The practical shelf life of salt is not measured in years or decades. It is measured in geological time. Your great-great-grandchildren's, great-great-grandchildren's, great-great-grandchildren will not have used up properly stored salt. This is not hyperbole. It is the chemical reality of a stable ionic compound stored away from conditions that could cause physical changes. The practical storage concern with salt is not chemical degradation. It is clumping, iodine loss, and contamination. Iodized salt loses its iodine content over time, particularly when exposed to humidity and heat, which is why salt manufacturers put a best-by date on their product. Non-iodized salt, sea salt, kosher salt, canning salt, has no such limitation and stores indefinitely without any degradation whatsoever. The preparedness value of salt is multidimensional and historically profound. Before refrigeration, salt was how humanity preserved virtually all food. Meat, fish, vegetables, and dairy were cured, pickled, brined, and preserved with salt across every culture on Earth. The word salary derives from the Latin salarium. Roman soldiers were paid partly in salt. In pre-modern economies, salt was literally as valuable as gold in some regions. This historical significance reflects its genuine, irreplaceable utility as a food preservation agent that functions entirely without electricity, refrigeration, or any other modern infrastructure. At current prices, bulk food-grade salt costs approximately Z20 to SOE30s per pound. There is almost no more valuable preparedness investment per dollar available. A 50-pound bag of canning salt represents a multi-decade supply for a typical household and costs approximately $15. How to store them? Store non-iodized salt in sealed, airtight glass jars, food-grade DP buckets, or sealed Mylar bags. Salt is heavy. Distribute across multiple smaller containers for handling ease. Prioritize non-iodized varieties for long-term storage, and store iodine tablets separately if dietary iodine supplementation is a concern. Item 4. Hard liquor and pure grain alcohol. This item appears at number 4 on this list not because of its recreational uses, though those are relevant to morale, but because of its chemistry, its versatility, and its historical role as one of the most stable and universally valuable substances a household can store. Distilled spirits at 40% alcohol by volume, 80 proof, or above, whiskey, rum, vodka, gin, tequila, brandy do not expire in any meaningful sense. Alcohol at these concentrations is a powerful antiseptic that prevents microbial growth absolutely. The ethanol molecules also stabilize other flavor compounds through a variety of chemical mechanisms. An unopened bottle of whiskey sealed in glass is as stable as the bottle itself, which, being glass, is essentially indefinitely stable. The secondary uses of high-proof spirits make them extraordinarily versatile in a preparedness context. Vodka at 40% or above is an effective wound antiseptic. Grain alcohol at 95%. Everclear 190 proof, where available, is effectively medical-grade alcohol, usable for wound cleaning, equipment sterilization, and as a base for tinctures, extracts, and homemade cleaning solutions. At lower concentrations, spirits can be used as a fever treatment, rubbing the skin, a fire starter, a food flavoring, and, critically, as a barter commodity of extraordinarily stable and universal value. The barter dimension deserves explicit mention. In historical disruption scenarios, post-war periods, economic collapses, extended community isolation, alcohol has consistently functioned as one of the most reliable barter commodities. Its value is stable, its utility is universal, it does not spoil, and it is compact relative to its value. These properties make it a rational preparedness investment, even for households that do not consume alcohol. How to store them? Glass-bottled spirits at 40% or above store indefinitely sealed. Store in a cool, dark location away from direct sunlight, which can affect the color of spirits through photochemical reactions, though not their safety. Focus on value spirits rather than premium products for stockpile purposes. The quality difference matters much less when the primary use case is medical, functional, or barter rather than sipping enjoyment. Item 3. White vinegar and apple cider. Vinegar combined. Vinegar appears twice on this list, as individual items at numbers 25 and 24, but earns a combined mention at number 3 because together, these two products represent the most functionally versatile and shelf-stable liquids available in any household preparedness pantry, and their combined utility warrants emphasis at this position. Distilled white vinegar and apple cider vinegar are acid-preserved liquids with pH values so low that no pathogen can survive in them. They do not expire. They do not require refrigeration. They do not degrade meaningfully over any practical storage timeline. And they perform functions that no other single substance in this entire list can match. As a food preservation medium, vinegar enables pickling, the extension of perishable vegetables into shelf-stable products. Cucumbers become pickles. Cabbage becomes sauerkraut with salt, peppers, onions. Green beans, and dozens of other vegetables become shelf-stable condiments that provide essential vitamins and minerals when fresh produce is unavailable. This ability to actively extend the shelf life of other foods makes vinegar a force multiplier in any food storage system. As a cleaning and disinfection agent, white vinegar at 5% acidity kills most household pathogens without the supply chain vulnerability of commercial bleach. It requires no dilution for general surface cleaning, leaves no harmful residue, and is safe for food contact surfaces. In combination with baking soda, item 21 on this list, it provides a non-toxic cleaning system for virtually every household surface. As a cooking medium, vinegar provides acid, the dimension of flavor most missing from long-term stored foods based on grains and legumes. A splash of vinegar on beans brightens the dish. A tablespoon in soup adds depth. A small amount in baking improves texture. How to store them? Maximize storage quantity. 10 to 20 gallons of distilled white vinegar and 4 to 8 gallons of apple cider vinegar is a reasonable household target. Store in sealed glass or Liadibi containers in a cool, dark location. Item 2. Salt, honey, and the ancient triad. Before we reach the single most important item on this list, we need to address a concept that human civilizations discovered independently across centuries and continents without any knowledge of organic chemistry: the ancient triad of food preservation: salt, honey, and vinegar. The three substances that ancient civilizations used to preserve virtually everything edible share a common mechanism. Each one removes biologically available water from its environment. Salt does it through osmotic pressure. Honey does it through its 80% sugar concentration and low pH. Vinegar does it through extreme acidity. Together, these three substances formed the backbone of food preservation for all of recorded human history prior to the invention of refrigeration. Salt appears at number 5 on this list. Vinegar appears in combination at number 3. Honey, which appears in our number 1 slot, is the apex of this ancient triad, the single substance with the most documented long-term stability of any food in human history. But before we get to honey, we are placing this combined slot at number 2 to make a broader point about food storage strategy. The households that will be in the strongest position during any disruption are not the ones with the most variety of stored foods. They are the ones who understand food preservation well enough to actively extend the life of fresh and perishable foods they already have access to. Salt, vinegar, and honey enable that capability. They transform a household from passive consumers of stored food into active participants in food preservation, the way every generation before ours lived. A household with substantial quantities of all three can cure meat, pickle vegetables, ferment beverages, preserve fruits, and maintain a nutritionally diverse diet for months using fresh ingredients combined with these preservation agents. This is a fundamentally different and more resilient position than simply opening cans and pouches from a stored supply. Item 1. Honey is the single food with the most documented, scientifically verifiable, and historically proven indefinite shelf life of anything available to human beings. Archaeologists excavating Egyptian tombs have found honey that is 3,000 years old and still edible, still sweet, still biologically active. Honey pulled from ancient sealed clay vessels has been tested, found free of microbial contamination, and consumed by researchers without consequence. This is not a legend. It is a documented archaeological and chemical reality. The mechanism behind honey's extraordinary stability is multifactorial and elegant. First, honey is approximately 80% sugar by weight, primarily fructose and glucose, at a concentration so high that free water activity drops to 0.6 or below, well beneath the 0.7 threshold at which most microbial life can function. Second, honey is naturally acidic, with a pH between 3.2 and 4.5, a range that inhibits the growth of most bacteria. Third, honey naturally contains hydrogen peroxide, produced by the enzyme glucose oxidase that bees incorporate during production. This compound provides additional antimicrobial protection. Fourth, the high osmolarity of honey actively draws water out of microbial cells through osmosis, desiccating and killing any organism that attempts to colonize it. Fifth, raw honey contains propolis and other compounds with documented antimicrobial properties. These 5 distinct mechanisms work simultaneously. Honey is not just resistant to microbial growth. It actively destroys microorganisms. This is why it was used as a wound dressing in ancient medicine, and continues to be used in the form of medical-grade Manuka honey dressings in modern hospitals. The one and only risk with honey is Clostridium botulinum spores, which can survive in honey in a dormant, non-toxic spore form. These spores are harmless to adults and older children because the spores cannot germinate in the presence of normal stomach acid. However, infants under 12 months of age lack sufficient stomach acid to prevent germination, which is why honey should never be fed to infants. This is the only safety consideration associated with honey, and it applies only to one specific population. The practical value of honey as a long-term food storage item goes beyond its shelf life. It is a sweetener that provides trace amounts of antioxidants and minerals. It is a wound dressing. Raw honey applied to minor cuts and burns has genuine antimicrobial efficacy supported by clinical research. It is a cough suppressant. Clinical studies have found that honey is as effective as dextromethorphan, the active ingredient in most commercial cough syrups, for suppressing cough in adults and children. It is a food preservative. Fruits, nuts, and herbs can be stored in honey, protected from microbial spoilage by its chemistry, and it is one of the most calorie-dense natural foods available, at approximately 60 calories per tablespoon, providing immediately available glucose and fructose. From a supply chain standpoint, honey faces significant and growing pressure. Colony collapse disorder, the poorly understood phenomenon of mass honeybee colony deaths, has reduced the global honeybee population substantially over the past 2 decades. U.S. honey production has declined significantly, making the U.S. a substantial net importer of honey, primarily from Argentina, Brazil, Vietnam, and India. Adulteration of imported honey with high fructose corn syrup is a documented and widespread practice in the global honey trade. Pure, domestic, raw honey is increasingly scarce and expensive. This makes stockpiling quality domestic honey both more valuable and more urgent. A 60-pound bucket of raw, unfiltered domestic honey, available from beekeepers, health food stores, and online producers, costs approximately $150 to $250 depending on region and variety. It stores indefinitely in its sealed form. It provides sweetener, medicine, wound care, and food preservation capability for years. It is, by virtually every measure, the single most valuable long-term food storage investment available to any household. How to store it? Keep sealed in its original container, or transfer to sealed glass jars or food-grade GDP containers. Never exposed to excessive heat. Above 104 degrees Fahrenheit, the enzymes that provide antimicrobial activity begin to denature, and the product shifts from raw honey to processed honey. Store at room temperature in a dark location. If honey crystallizes, which is a natural process that occurs as glucose molecules precipitate out of solution, it remains perfectly usable. Simply warm the jar gently in warm water, never microwave to reliquefy. Crystallized honey is not spoiled honey. It is honey doing what honey does. If you build nothing else from this video, build a honey supply. It will outlast you. We have just covered 30 foods that either never expire or come as close to it as food science allows. Not one of them requires a generator. Not one requires refrigeration. Not one requires special expertise to store. They are all available right now at grocery stores, warehouse clubs, farmers markets, and online. The pattern you may have noticed across this entire list is that longevity in food comes from the same handful of mechanisms: low water activity, high acidity, high sugar or salt concentration, low fat content or fat that resists oxidation, and the removal of the enzymes and microorganisms that drive decay. Once you understand these mechanisms, you can look at almost any food and understand intuitively how long it will last and what conditions will extend or shorten its useful life. Build this stockpile one item at a time. Add honey to your cart this week. Pick up salt and sugar next week. Buy a bag of white rice the week after that. There is no urgency in each individual purchase. The urgency is in the pattern of purchasing and in starting before you need to. The families who will be comfortable, genuinely comfortable, not just surviving in any future disruption, are the ones building this knowledge and these supplies right now, while everything is calm and the shelves are stocked. They are not doing anything dramatic. They are just paying attention, understanding the fundamentals, and acting on that understanding consistently, over time. That is all preparedness really is. And now you have 30 more reasons to start. Thank you for watching. Please share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more content like this every week.